Hey guys, in this video I'll show you a 2-bar heavy attack build capable of up to 144k DPS. I'm going to show two different subclassing setups. We're always going to use Herald of the Tome and Assassination, but the third skill line is going to be either Stormcalling or Ardent Flame. Ardent Flame is the more difficult one and the one with which I reached 144k DPS. With Stormcalling, the build is much easier to play, but the best DPS I got with it was 138k. But I'll talk more about the differences between them and what makes Ardent Flame harder once we get to the rotation. As always, I have tested the build in a lot of veteran trials, and you'll be able to find logs in the description. The build is also my website, so if you prefer written guides over YouTube videos, you can read it there instead. The link will be in the description. Starting off with subclassing, and with the easier setup. We're going to use Arcanist's Herald of the Tome, Nablet's Assassination, and Sorcerer's Stormcalling. This build relies on cracks generation from the class mastery script on Ulf's contingency, so the base class has to be Arcanist. The second setup, which has the potential to do more damage but is more difficult to play, replaces Stormcalling with Ardent Flame. This grants us access to extremely powerful ultimate, Standard of Might, two very strong active abilities, Venomous Skull and Flames of Oblivion, and a very convenient passive ability, Molten Whip. However, to actually make use of these, you need to weave medium attacks. Because if you simply only use fully charged heavy attacks, you will never have enough time to keep up these abilities. Which is why I'm advising Stormcalling as the regular option, which is much easier to play, and not that far behind in DPS. Moving on to skills. This is the base setup that will work for most situations, and which should be your starting point when making situational setups. First we have Ulf's Contingency, with the Shock, Class Mastery, and Force combination on it. It's your source of crucial and power buff, which increases damage done by heavy attacks by 70%. Since Ulf's Contingency is a Mage's Guild skill, it will trigger the Might of the Guild passive, which grants you Empower for 10 seconds. Thanks to the Class Mastery, it will generate cracks, which you'll need for Tentacular Dread. It also deals decent damage on AoE, and grants you Minor Force buff, increasing your critical damage by 10%. Ulf's Contingency is delayed until the next skill cast, but whenever it's needed you can activate it early by simply bashing your enemy. If you cast this ability as you're finishing your heavy attack, the Empower you gain from it will start working just in time to boost the final tick of the heavy attack you just finished. Next we have Camouflage Hunter. This ability will passively grant you Minor Berserk, which means you won't have to rely on healers for that. It will also grant you 3% weapon and spell damage from the Slayer passive. Next we have Merciless Resolve, an ability that will cause your light and heavy attacks to generate stacks. You can spend 5 stacks to fire a powerful arrow that also heals you if you're in melee range. It also passively grants you Major Savagery and Prophecy. Next we have Tentacular Dread, a crack spender which increases enemies' damage taken from you by 11%. Banner Bearer, with the Magic, Cavalier's Charge and Courage combination on it, increases your magical damage done by 6%, grants weapon damage based on your movement speed, and grants Minor Courage, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 215. Soul Harvest is a cheap ultimate that increases target's damage taken from you by 20%. Having it slotted will also cause you to regain 10 ultimate whenever you deal a final blow against an enemy. Concealed Weapon is an ability which passively grants you Minor Expedition, which will increase your weapon and spell damage thanks to the Cavalier's Charge script on your Banner Bearer. However, you're also getting Minor Expedition from Hurricane, so Concealed Weapon is only useful for filling the gaps between Hurricane casts. It's extremely inconsequential, but you won't have enough time for another active ability, so this is the best thing you can slot. And because of that, this is also your flex slot, where you should slot situational skills, like heals, whenever you need them. Inspired Scholarship deals additional damage whenever we deal damage of a class skill, up to once every 3 seconds. This damage also generates cracks if you had none. It also passively provides Major Brutality and Sorcery. Hurricane is an ability which deals ramping up damage around you over 20 seconds. In this setup, it's your only class dot, so it's crucial for proccing the Inspired Scholarship. It will also be your only source of Minor Expedition whenever you unslot Concealed Weapon, which is a buff you'll need for Banner Bearer's Cavalier's Charge. Hurricane will also grant you Major Resolve, which normally should be provided by the tank, so it's only a benefit if you're playing with a bad tank. Elemental Blockade is a ground dot that will constantly reapply your backbar weapon enchantment. It will also do increased damage, thanks to the Crushing Wall set, and proc of balance if your supports aren't already doing it. The Languid Eye is an ultimate which is worth using over Soul Harvest only when you're starting a fight with a lot of ultimates stored up. So that was the base setup, but now I'm gonna show you a bunch of situational skills, which you can use to tailor this base setup to specific fights. Whenever you need to slot situational skills, replace Concealed Weapon. Resolving Vigor is a self-heal you'll need for some fights. Stampede is an alternative for Elemental Blockade, if you can rely on your healers to keep up Lightning Elemental Blockade. Stampede allows you to trigger the Merciless Charge set, which provides a decent DPS boost. Proximity Detonation is an extremely good ability for trash packs. You can precast it as you're running into them. Elemental Rage is the best ultimate for trash packs. Banner Bearer, with the Magic, Cavalier's Charge, and Heroism script, is a combination which replaces Courage with Heroism. It can be used if your supports are already providing minor Courage, and it saves you money, because the potions that provide minor Heroism are expensive. Inner Light is an alternative for Camouflage Hunter. The 7% max Magicka it provides is slightly stronger than the 3% weapon and spell damage provided by Camouflage Hunter, so it's a better passive skill if your supports are already providing minor Berserk. Now let me show you a bunch of examples of how your final setup could look after you apply these situational skills to your base setup. This is an example of a setup you can use for trash packs. Proximity Detonation replaces Concealed Weapon, and Elemental Rage replaces the Languid Eye. This is an example of a setup you can use when using the Ardent Flame skill line. Flames of Oblivion replaces Camouflage Hunter and swaps places with Inspired Scholarship. Venomous Claw replaces Concealed Weapon. Molten Whip replaces Hurricane. Standard of Might replaces the Languid Eye. Ulf's Contingency replaces the Shock script with Flame. And Banner Bearer replaces the Cavalier's Charge script with Class Mastery. And as for additional tips, Inspired Scholarship can swap places with Venomous Claw if you have enough penetration. This way, Venomous Claw will snapshot its dot while you're on bar with more stats. But you'll rarely have enough penetration for that in actual content, but it can be done on the Parse dummy. And this is an example of a setup you can use for trash packs when using the Ardent Flame skill line. So compared to the regular Ardent Flame setup, Proximity Detonation replaces Venomous Claw, and Elemental Rage replaces Standard of Might. Now as for rotation, I don't use a static rotation, so this is just a list of priorities. Simply recast abilities when they run out, and follow the list of priorities when there are multiple things to refresh. If you're tracking the off-balance debuff, you should cancel your heavy attack when there's around 1 to 2 seconds left on the off-balance immunity. This way, the next heavy attack you start will finish its channel during off-balance, and you'll be able to fit 3 heavy attacks during a single off-balance window. With this many active abilities, you can sometimes benefit from replacing fully charged heavy attacks with medium attacks, which means holding left mouse button until first damage tick, whenever there are multiple abilities you need to refresh. You can still maintain all abilities while using only fully charged heavy attacks, you'll just have a bit more downtime on them. The best way to weave backbar abilities into your rotation is by swapping to backbar right after your heavy attack finished, casting the ability, and then immediately going back to front bar to start channeling the next heavy attack. This is however impossible with high ping. So this is the list of priorities with Stormcalling variant. Use Ulf's Contingency if your Empowerer is out, or if it's going to run out by the end of the heavy attack you're channeling. Use the Languid Eye if you're starting a fight with a lot of ultimates stored up. Use Soul Harvest if it's ready, ideally right before off-balance starts, but if it becomes ready just as off-balance ends, it isn't worth waiting for the next one. Use Tentacular Dread if you're at 3 cracks, and the Tentacular Dread debuff is close to running out, or has already run out. Use Merciless Resolve if you have at least 5 stacks, and Soul Harvest is active. Outside of Soul Harvest, you should still cast it when it's at or above 8 stacks, to avoid wasting stacks. Use Elemental Blockade, use Inspired Scholarship, use Hurricane, and Ulf's Contingency as a filler. And keep in mind that you can pre-buff Ulf's Contingency, Inspired Scholarship, and Hurricane before entering combat. Now this is the Ardent Flame variant. With this many active abilities, you have to sometimes weave medium attacks, which means holding left mouse button until the first damage tick. Use Ulf's Contingency if your Empowerer is out, or if it's going to run out by the end of the heavy attack you're channeling. Use Standard of Might if you're starting a fight with a lot of ultimates stored up. Use Flames of Oblivion if Molten Whip stacks are about to expire. Use Soul Harvest if it's ready. Ideally right before Off Balance starts, but if it becomes ready just as Off Balance ends, it isn't worth waiting for the next one. Use Tentacular Dread if you're at 3 cracks, and the Tentacular Dread debuff is close to running out or has already run out. Use Merciless Resolve if you have at least 5 stacks and Soul Harvest is active. Outside of Soul Harvest, you should still cast it when it's at or above 8 stacks, to avoid wasting stacks. Use Elemental Blockade, use Venomous Claw, use Inspired Scholarship, use Flames of Oblivion, and Ufsys Contingency as a filler. And keep in mind that you can pre-buff Ufsys Contingency, Inspired Scholarship, and Flames of Oblivion before entering combat. Now as for passives. I am now very quickly going through all of the passives you should get on the screen. You can either pause the video or look up this list on the website guide. This is the base setup that will work for most situations and which should be your starting point when making situational setups. So Infallible Mage, Surgeon's Mail, Rakat's Voidmantle Mythic, One Piece Slimecrow, and Crushing Wall. When choosing different situational sets, you can only replace Infallible Mage. Surgeon's Mail and Rakat's Voidmantle are too strong and too crucial for this build to ever be replaced. If you want to use a medium armor set, you have to make sure your group is providing enough penetration. Infallible Mage parses 131.6k DPS, which is only 6.8k lower than the top setup, which is Slivers of Nolarca. But Slivers of Nolarca is focused on single target damage, and it's a medium set. So when using it, you have to make sure your supports are providing you with enough penetration. And because of that, Infallible Mage is the most practical set. Now, this is a list of situational gear. Sul'Dan's Torment is the best set for trash packs, and for bosses that regularly spawn smaller adds. Slivers of Nolarca is the best set for single target damage. Merciless Charge is a replacement for Crushing Wall, for when your healers are providing off balance. Now, this is a list of alternative gear, so gear that is easier to obtain and can be used while you work towards the best gear. As for crafted gear, we have Order's Wrath and Towerkill Strike. As for dungeon gear, we have Noble Duelist, and as for gear coming from PvP, we have Deadly Strike. You can use the Flame enchant instead of Shock if your supports are providing off balance. Now let me show you a bunch of examples of final setups you could end up with. This is a setup made of just crafted gear, which uses Order's Wrath, Towerkill Strike, and 2-piece Assassin's Guile for the crit chance bonus. It parses 88.4k DPS, although a huge majority of this DPS loss stems from lack of Surgeon's Mail. Next, this is a setup you should use if you don't have access to any trial gear. Noble Duelist replaces Infallible Mage. This setup parses 125.4k DPS. Next, this is a setup you should use if you don't have access to the Rakat's Voidmantle Mythic. Until Mirror's Construct replaces Rakat's Voidmantle and Slimecrow. This setup parses 117.2k DPS. And this is the best setup for single target damage. Slivers of Nolarca replaces Infallible Mage. This setup parses 138.4k DPS. Keep in mind, you have to make sure your supports are providing enough penetration if you want to use this setup, because Slivers of Nolarca is a medium armor set. Moving on to champion points. In the blue tree you want to use Weapons Expert, which increases light and heavy attack damage by 20%, Deadly Aim, which increases single target damage by 6%, Wrathful Strikes, which increases your weapon and spell damage by 205, and Fighting Finesse, which increases your critical damage by 8%. Replace Fighting Finesse with Exploiter if your supports are providing enough critical damage for you to reach the 125% cap without Fighting Finesse. And replace Deadly Aim with Biting Aura in AoE fights. In the red tree, you want to use Bond's Vitality, which increases your max health by 1400, Fortified, which increases your armor by 1731, Celerity, which increases your movement speed by 10%, and Rejuvenation, which increases all of your recoveries by 90. Moving on to race. The difference between best and worst race is about 5% of DPS, and there is no content in the entire game that you'd be blocked from completing because of choosing a bad race. With that said, the best races for 12-man content are High Elf and Dark Elf. The best race for 4-man content is Khajiit. Other decent options are Orc and Breton. Moving on to Mundus. Most of the time, you should use the Thief Mundus, which increases your critical chance. The lover is an option if you're using medium armor and your group isn't providing enough penetration. But a light armor set, combined with the Thief Mundus, is always going to be stronger. As for attributes, it's extremely simple. You should always put all 64 points into Magicka. Moving on to food. Most of the time, you should use the Arteon Pickled Fish Bowl, which increases your max health and max Magicka. Solitude Salmon Millet Soup is a cheaper alternative. For dummy parsing, you can use Tomato Garlic Chutney, which gives you only max Magicka. Moving on to potions. Most of the time, you should use Tri-Slot potions. They will greatly improve your sustain. You can craft them by combining Columbine, Bugloss, and Mountain Slaver. There are better potions, but they're extremely expensive. Heroism potions can provide 100% uptime on minor heroism buff, which generates ultimate. But they're extremely expensive because they're crafted by combining Dragon Rheum, Dragon's Blood, and Columbine. Moving on to Parse. As I've said before, the highest Parse I've achieved was using the Ardent Flame variant and Null Arca gear, and it was 144k DPS. With Stormcalling instead, my highest Parse was 138.4k DPS. With Infallible Ether, which is the regular setup, the Parse was 131.6k DPS. With Noble Duelist, 125.4k DPS. With Until Mirror's Construct, instead of Rakat's Void Mantle, 117.2k DPS. And with only crafted gear, 88.4k DPS. And that's it for this video. If you have any more questions, you can comment down below or join our Discord server Wildheart. As always, feedback will be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Twitch. Thanks for watching and see you next time.